JTC 100, we are discussing journalism. This is part 2. Last time we were just starting to discuss the 8 news values that news workers, in a sense, utilize and hold in their mind as they make decisions about what to cover in the news business. And the first one we talked about was controversy and conflict. So let's move on to the next news value on the list, and that is number 2, impact or consequence. Impact or consequence. This is any event or issue that has the potential to influence, to affect, to impact, to have a consequence for a relatively large number of people. For example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunges nearly 900 points in, say, 2 days. But this is big news. This is a big news story because many Americans have their retirements largely tied up in the stock market, and if this happens, they watch their retirements lose a great amount of value. At least if they sold everything that moment, which people would be stupid to do, and oftentimes they don't. They just kind of ride it out. We know to do that. Another example of impact or consequence, I could name thousands, but ongoing western wildfires, and this is what's happening. I'm in the Colorado area, and so things are dry with climate change. It's getting worse, and we have a lot of western wildfires. There oftentimes will be up to 100 wildfires burning across the West, destroying dozens of homes, forcing hundreds, even thousands of people to flee, stretching firefighting budgets at the local, the state, and the national level to the breaking point. This affects a lot of people. Does it affect everybody across the country? No, but it does affect a large section. It's more likely to be covered. Another example, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami of 2011. We've just got I think we've got some. I think it's going to work. There it is.
避難して山の方に高台に上がっていく道路があるわけですね。はい、そしてこれ津波が襲ったのはだいたい揺れてから何分後ぐらいですか。
30分はかかっていない。
30分かかっていない。だいたい3時10分前後なんでしょうか。
はいはい、
この雪崩、海水がこう街を飲み込むように入ってきましたけれども、この時の感じというのはどういう
？Just absolutely astounding to watch video like that, and I wanted to stop it because I wouldn't be able to hear me here. But and so it's a 9.0 magnitude earthquake striking that region, more really 900 times greater than a 2010 tremor that devastated Haiti. Rattled the planet on its axis. It shifts Japan's main island 3 to 16 feet. Then come the waves, at times 30 feet high and sweeping 6 miles inland, just literally tearing these communities apart. That's important for a large number of people who are suddenly finding themselves challenged by this surging water. But the bigger challenge for the rest of the Earth, the people of the Earth, was the threat of nuclear meltdown. There was a major nuclear facility there near where we're seeing this video shot, and they believe quite a bit more than 15,000 people died. Nearly 5,000 disappeared in the fires and the tsunami. But we could have, if they hadn't averted that nuclear disaster, it could have affected life on the entire planet. So we covered that story. Next news value, physical proximity. Physical proximity. These are events that occur in a news organization's more or less backyard. Issues that affect or have potential to affect a news organization's audience. And so note that backyard is kind of relatively defined. It involves local issues or events, where local is relatively defined within the context of this news organization's audience size and share. Local could be global, or it could be national, or it could be state or city or neighborhood. So it's what you decide to be local. What would that be? I'll give you an example. So if the entire Earth is threatened by an alien invasion, I'm not saying that this is happening, that would suddenly kind of be a local issue because it affects all of us, really where we live. But generally it's more at the community level. For example, here in Fort Collins, there's a variety of efforts underway to ease the strain of very long trains that regularly lumber, kind of rumble through Fort Collins, causing these huge traffic delays. Things like building an overpass in your town, timing the lights to help move traffic along. They may install message boards that warn people of delays ahead so they can find alternative routes. They're trying to do things to work through this nightmare that's caused by trains. Other examples, Other new laws or proposed changes in laws, political races, partisan debates, local scandals, business or institutional failures or advancements, natural or man-made disasters, crime, really any story that is local, but again, local, relatively defined. It can be as widespread as a nation or as small as a neighborhood. Really depends on your news market. Now compare that to psychological proximity. This is an event or issue that occurs to someone else or outside. Let me say this again. It's an event or issue that may take place in someone else's backyard to someone, say, across the country, but it makes us concerned for our own physical, financial, or emotional well-being, or that of our family, friends, or community, or even these people themselves who are far away from us. So we're psychologically bonded with these people. And of course, a perfect example of that is September 11th, 2001, the terrorist attacks on the United States. You know, my memory from that is that even though this was happening out in the Northeast, and usually we don't have a direct connection. I mean, again, I know that quite a few people here in Colorado have friends and relatives, or they may be from that area. They have that connection, but many people don't. Still, people that would have no usual connection to that area of the United States were very connected and felt that this was an attack on our country, therefore an attack on all of us. And so these sorts of newsworthy events related to psychological proximity lead us to ask, could it happen here? Could this thing have happened to me? Could it happen to someone I know? What would it be like if it did happen to me? And so let me bring a story from Deer Creek, Colorado. Deer Creek, Colorado, which is just down the road from me here in Fort Collins. This happened in 2010. Littleton, Deer Creek Middle School, a gunman opens fire on students. CBS News covered the story here, narrated by Harry Smith. I think. There it is. There we go.
Deer Creek Middle School is just 3 miles from Columbine High School, the site of America's most infamous school shooting. So when a gunman opened fire in Deer Creek's parking lot, the sight of students running in terror seemed all too familiar.
I saw the shooter. I saw him shoot again, and this kid fell to the ground.
According to police, the alleged gunman, 32-year-old Bruce O. Eastwood, opened fire with a hunting rifle, wounding 2 students.
I noticed that he was working a bolt-action rifle and realized that I had time to get him before he could chamber another round.
All right, so you get the idea. Psychological connection. I have used myself as an example. I have kids in school. They're in Colorado, though I don't have a direct connection to this particular school in Deer Creek. It's really not in my backyard in a psychological sense. Or in a physical sense, but in a psychological sense, I do make a connection with it. So anyway, I think you get the idea. Next news value, human interest. Personalizing or putting a human face to a bigger issue or an event. Human interest. This involves, for instance, illustrating the impact of an event or an issue on an ordinary person who's caught up in this larger swirl of activity. Journalists like stories with a human angle or issues that can be personalized. Humanizing the story enriches the storytelling process, many people believe, makes the story more emotional, more moving, enables the audience to better connect to an issue or event than just, for instance, hearing some statistics, rifling off numbers. So this is an excerpt from a story by a New Orleans TV station on Donnell Jackson and how he survived and triumphed over Hurricane Katrina.
They say home is where the heart is.
Not too much, just a little dab.
But as Donnell Jackson cooks up a pot of jambalaya, his heart is in New Orleans.
All you see is just destruction. Look, you know what I'm saying? Your neighborhood looking like a third world country. This is a tree on my neighbor's house.
Born and raised in downtown New Orleans, Jackson's family was hit hard and lost everything in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
I felt helpless.
He was just beginning his senior year at Temple University, and on August 29, 2005, also his mother's birthday, he received a call from her.
I love you, gotta go. And that was it. The last time I heard from her for that entire week.
He held on to those words while trying to use media coverage to his advantage.
I was basically trying to find her on the TV, but eventually that got too depressing.
Depressing images, but through prayer, he remained hopeful until he...
So again, the idea is that we will connect with this greater story by connecting with Donnell in a situation where he's actually watching the television to see if his mother is being plucked off of the top of some wreckage, after the hurricane. Okay, so let's move on to the next news value, and that is the unusual. Let's see, I want to go here, there. The unusual, the novel, the deviant. So it's about not the everyday, not a common happening. So this is a picture of a python versus an alligator. You might be wondering what we're looking at. And essentially the python ate the alligator. Then the alligator expanded within the python's gut and then sort of burst out of this python, which the alligator is already dead, but the python is also dead at this point. So this is just weird. When you look at that picture, you don't know what you're looking at. Or how about this one? This is a story about AmBam, or at least some images of AmBam with some music. A gorilla at a British animal park who became a YouTube sensation after researchers posted video of AmBam walking upright like a human being. And so, millions of people have viewed that story and viewed some of this imagery just because it's interesting to watch. I guess that's unusual. Another news value, prominence or celebrity. Issues or events that involve a well-known person, such as a performer, an athlete, a politician, or some other individual whose actions or behavior are considered newsworthy due to his or her prominence. In person probably could be a sports team. It doesn't have to just be a person. It can be an institution, an organization, a corporation. So who you are or aren't can make a big difference in whether or not you become the focus of a news story. Who you are is a news value. If you are well known or famous, you're prominent in society. Prominence is mostly, but not always linked to personhood. And that's really a kind of an important thing to understand. If Nike goes bankrupt, it's likely to become a big news story, but not the case if a small unknown company goes under. You see what I mean? So maybe I'm not explaining this real well, but if you're prominent either as an individual or an institution, you are more likely to be covered if you're already known before the story, before the event takes place. Now, if you're well known, your actions, your statements, your death, your marriage, your relationships, your successes, your failures could all become fodder for news. Now, let me show you something. This is the front page of news sites from around the world on June 26, 2009. And these look similar everywhere you would look on that day. The headlines reported the death of Michael Jackson, as you can see there. But then what's interesting is you look a little bit lower down here. It says actress Farrah Fawcett dies at 62. Both had died that day before. Now, Jackson's headline is more prominent, as seen in the LA Times on the right. And Fawcett's is less so. Fawcett didn't even make the front page of the publication on the left, as you can see. Of course, Jackson's death was unexpected and more newsworthy than hers because he was more prominent and there were other news values linked to his death, like controversy, impact, the unusual, the controversial notion of who is to blame for Jackson's death. Was it Jackson? Was it his doctor who was implicated? Both of them? Was it someone else? There was a lot of controversy over the doctors who wrote him prescriptions and may have contributed to his death, over his use of several different drugs, controversies over whether help was called right away or whether it took him a while and how long they discovered his body and things like that, controversy over his estate. And of course, there had been controversy surrounding Jackson for years as far as his relationships with other people. So there's great impact. Thousands of fans followed his life, that is, and mourned his death. And part of Los Angeles was virtually shut down during the memorial services. And it was unusual. The nature of his death, the use of IV drugs outside of a hospital or medical facility, Again, the circumstances surrounding his children, the revisiting of his highly unusual life, the highs and the lows. And finally, as we said, he was prominent, one of the most famous people in the world. Farrah Fawcett Major, she was one of the original Charlie's Angels, kind of a swimsuit pinup person at some point during her career, but not as prominent, and therefore is not as prominently covered. Okay, that's the end of journalism part 2.